Welcome back to Tranquility du Jour, nourishing conversations about living a full and meaningful life with doses of tranquility. Episode 519. I'm your host, Kimberly Wilson, bringing you tranquility through this medium since 2005. Today, we're talking about having a fit habit, and with guest Caren Magill about mindset and habits, getting and staying fit over 40, and nutrition tips, and more, even like favorite products. For those of you new to the podcast, show notes can be found at kimberlywilson.com/519. Also, be sure to hit subscribe in your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode of Tranquility du Jour. There's also an app if you want all those back episodes. And if you are new to Tranquility du Jour, check out kimberlywilson.com/new, and a big, big welcome. So a few upcoming things, be sure to check out the new Tranquility du Jour annual pass, which gives you access to so many things happening in 2021. You can find out more about this at kimberlywilson.com/2021, and would love to take you on the journey through 2021 of really honing in on tranquility tools and tips with seasonal gatherings and lots of support. Also, January 1st, and this is included in the annual pass, we have a New Year's virtual retreat. That's happening from 2 to 5 Eastern Time. Would love to have you join. Then finally, save the date for TDJ Live, which is our free 1-hour masterclass that happens every season. And this new one is happening January 10th from 8 to 9 Eastern Time. Hello there, listener. One thing that I think I know about you is that you love books, just like me. And it can be tricky to find the time to read. So that's why Audible is an excellent resource. You can listen anywhere from various devices, your iPhone, your tablet, your computer, while you're waiting in line, at the doctor's office, all sorts of places. You just whip it out and you are ready to go with your entire library. And you can also pick up right where you left off. There's hundreds of thousands of titles, including this month's online book club pick, Dolly Parton Songteller, My Life and Lyrics. Would love to have you reading along with us. So you can sign up for a free 30-day trial, and your first book is free with audibletrial.com/tranquility du jour. Happy reading. Caren Magill is a certified yoga teacher, fitness instructor, nutrition coach, and the author of The Fit Habit. She inspires women in their 40s, 50s, and beyond to live well and fit by cultivating healthy habits that will last a lifetime. Welcome, Caren.
Hi, it's great to talk with you.
It is great to have you. And I'm trying to think, the last time I saw you, was that Costa Rica?
No, it was in LA when you were doing your little round the country trip with Lily and Lily.
Oh, yes, of course, in 2013. Oh, my goodness.
Yes. I was thinking about this morning. I have been either reading your blog or listening to your podcast since, I think, 2006.
Oh my gosh.
You are such an OG. Like, I can't believe you've been doing this for this long. It's fantastic.
You're sweet. Yeah. It's one of those things where it's like, I like to tell people, yes, I was doing podcasts when I had to explain what a podcast was. People didn't get it. So it's so funny, the boom and whatnot. And yeah, with, blogging and all of that. And how fun that you've been a part of the journey for so long.
Yes, definitely.
Well, so I am really excited to chat with you about what you're doing with the Fit Habit, because I have to tell you this, Caren. I saw, and I think it was on Instagram, that you were like, my goal is going to be to have a veggie with each meal. And I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. Mine too. And then I was like, a few days later, I was like, okay, a veggie each day, and I was like, oh my God. And there's sometimes, where it's like, I don't even have, something that is just completely not processed, meaning, well, we all know what not processed means, but it's just like, it's amazing how hard that can be. So I'm really excited to chat with you, particularly since you focus on kind of women in their 40s, 50s and beyond about, creating a fit habit. So can you talk to us a little bit about your journey into creating this?
Sure. Well, from a philosophy standpoint, it's experiential starting back in my 20s. And I'll tell you, Kimberly, I'm 135 pounds now. And the reason I tell you that is because I was 210 pounds when I was in my early 20s. I smoked a pack a day. I was a binge drinker. I had dropped out of high school, working at a roadside bar as a bartender. I was literally a country music song without the dog running away. And I somehow had the wherewithal at that point in my life to realize that the behaviors and habits that I had were taking me down a very bad path, not just from a weight perspective, but in general, because I often feel that weight that we hold on to is not just physical, it's also emotional and spiritual. So I was making bad choices all over my life. And I really give myself a lot of credit for turning that around, because this is long before Google or the internet even. So I had to figure that out myself. And how I eventually lost 80 pounds was not any one big grand gesture. I didn't run a marathon or anything like that. It was a very intentional but natural progression of small, tiny habits that I wasn't aware of at the time. But, I was working as a bartender in a bar, and for lunch I would have burgers and fries. And one day I decided to have a burger with salad and maybe a burger salad, no bun. So very small, gradual, what ended up being tiny habits that evolved over years where, it took about, I would say just over a year to lose 80 pounds. And with that journey, I also changed a lot more about my life. I went back to school, got an undergraduate, and got out of the bar scene, and eventually moved to California and continued that fit habit. It eventually ended up going into yoga because I lost my mom shortly after moving to California, and changed a lot more about my life. But the underlying thread there was that movement was really my way of processing issues and struggles in my life. And the more I could do that, the more I could transform both physically, emotionally, and spiritually. So that's how the fit habit evolved for me as a person. As a business or a brand, and we were talking earlier before we got on about the start of your journey. But it wasn't until 2006 when I first dabbled in yoga. And then I actually found, and I credit you for some of this, that I found you, and you talked about yoga, but you also talked about it in the sense of entrepreneurship. And that was a huge influence in my life because I wasn't happy in my corporate job. So I ended up, and I will blame you for this, I ended up a year later leaving my corporate job in California, selling all my stuff and going to India to do a teacher training. And it was an amazing experience. But it was there that I realized that I didn't want to teach yoga as a career. It wasn't practical at the time. So I came back, and I eventually did go back into corporate, but in a very different capacity, something that was more aligned with me. But I held on to that idea of entrepreneurship and just creativity and expression. And what started out as a small blog called The Skeptic Yogi eventually evolved into The Fit Habit as I started to pull all these through lines of not just yoga, but fitness and health and wellness in general, and eating. It all kind of pulled through. And as I've aged, because I'm now, I just turned 50 this year. As I've aged, I've continued to evolve the brand with me, because I find that a lot of women over 40 are they get to a point where everything they've done in the past that has worked no longer works. So they need to change and tweak habits and behaviors. And I found that has been a really impactful place for me to land. So that, in a very long-winded way, is how the Fit Habit began.
No, I love it. It's so tangible. And I think we can all picture, kind of binge drinking and, burgers and fries for lunch and going like, oh, why am I gaining weight? Or why do I not feel good? It's like sometimes we just don't get it, putting it together as to how this stuff affects us. And as you're saying, on more levels than just physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, right? It's like huge. And so I love, thank you for sharing that, because I think it is really, really helpful. And, sharing too, it's like, okay, maybe I remove the bun, right? Instead of French fries, maybe I have salad. It's just these little tweaks that can make such a difference. And I know we'll talk more about that in a moment, but I just wanted to highlight that because I think it's important. Now, one thing that you just said though, Caren, that I'm like, I'm like nodding away here is like the changes that happen to us after 40. It's funny because my partner, Tim, is always like, if I ate like you did, I'd be 400 pounds, or like you do, I'd be 400 pounds because I love sugar and, all of this. And so I'm realizing though, that it's like, it does, it catches up with you. And so it's like, I don't know if metabolism is shifting, it's, there's just a lot of changes. And so, and of course, hormones, et cetera. So I'm curious, what would you say are kind of the overarching changes that you have noticed with yourself or even with your clients that happens in our bodies, and also, kind of emotionally for us once we hit our 40s and into 50s?
Well, it's a metabolic change, and it really starts with composition. So once you hit around 35, your body naturally starts to let go of muscle mass. And muscle mass and metabolism are hand in hand. So when we hear that, strength training is great for us, not only because it will help with bone health, so you don't get osteoporosis later in life, it also has a lot to do with how you can metabolize carbohydrates. And when I say carbohydrates, I mean everything from cakes, cookies, and crackers all the way to broccoli and cauliflower. Now, obviously, the broccoli, cauliflower, and your body metabolizes that quite well. But what's changing in your body is that ability to eat a ton of bread and carbs and sugar generally, because sugar is sugar, but it's also fast metabolizing carbohydrates and grains like wheat and any sort of grain that is metabolized in your body and turned into glucose quite quickly. And glucose is basically sugar. So if you're eating a lot of bread in general, you are eating a lot of sugar, whether you're aware of it or not. And then, of course, there's hidden sugars and things like, yogurt, where somebody might think that a fruit yogurt is quite healthy. If you look at the side of the package, it's usually around 16 grams of sugar. That's 4 teaspoons of sugar. That's more than you would probably put in your tea. And you wouldn't imagine that much sugar being in your yogurt. So when you get past 40 and you're probably premenopausal, perimenopausal, your body and your hormones change a lot. And one of the things that I recommend to my clients, if you consider, Maslow's hierarchy of needs is basically a triangle, right? And at the bottom, it's sort of your basic foundational things, and then going up from there to the tip of the triangle, which is probably, the least important thing. I think at the bottom, if I were to characterize a metabolic ideal position or focus for a woman over 40, it would be at the bottom, sleep. Like sleep has so much to do with obviously like brain function. So your ability to make decisions and to focus and to concentrate, to your memory recall, your mood regulation, all of those things that impact every area of your life. What I don't think a lot of people realize is it also impacts your metabolic hormones. So leptin and ghrelin, are two hormones that regulate that hunger signal from your gut to your brain, and also your cravings for certain types of foods. So when women are underslept, which broadly a lot of us are, we tend to, number one, crave a lot of sugar and carbohydrate foods. And number two, that signal from your stomach or your gut to your brain saying, hey, we've eaten enough here, we're full, shuts down. So you're just constantly hungry. So that's, if you've ever found that you're hangry, a lot of that could be sleep. It's also, if you eat a lot of sugar, your body also wants to have a lot more sugar. So generally, I say at the bottom of that hierarchy is sleep. And if you can practice good sleep hygiene, you're not only impacting, your weight and your health, but you're impacting your career and your relationships and all of those things. So sleep, number one. Number two, I would say above that is mindset. In my graduate work, I did a lot of work around identity and around behavior change with identity. And if you identify yourself as somebody who's not healthy, not athletic, not somebody who enjoys movement or, healthy foods, you will always consider yourself that person. You will always fight against that person. Even now, as someone who's been practicing fitness for a good portion of their life, but started out very overweight, I still am, there's a part of my identity that is that overweight woman that, like to drink and smoke and eat all the bad food. So I need to consciously move past her and show her a new way. And I think that that's a big part of changing habits in general and moving towards greater health, regardless of what age you're at. But especially for women over 40, food and hydration and would probably be that next level piece where you have to change your diet just in small ways. When I say have to change your diet, I think that terrifies a lot of people. But really, it's about making small tweaks and looking at yourself as an experiment. The one way I like to look at diet is ask yourself, what can you get away with? Like you just said, you could get away with a lot more than Tim, but each of us are different. And if you slowly start to make adjustments and see changes, then you can really sort of understand what works for you and what doesn't. Because I could give you a litany of things that, are great for weight loss or great for weight maintenance or strength development. But at the end of the day, we're all individuals. So it's really an idea of taking on a journey and being mindful of what works for you and what doesn't, what makes you feel sick, what doesn't, what makes you feel leaner or stronger or more energetic, and what brings you down, and going from there. And I can get a little bit more specific with nutrition, but above that, at the very tip of that triangle, I would say is movement. Movement is critical and really important just in terms of, processing emotional and spiritual experiences in our lives to maintaining strength and that muscle mass that I talked about earlier. But it's not as important as sleep, mindset, and food and hydration being sort of fundamental to that foundation of healthy habits. So I'll pause there because I know I just said a lot.
Yeah, no, all great stuff. And as you were talking, one of the pieces that, stuck out to me also with this is sleep hygiene. Mm-hmm. And I think overall we get it, but can you describe what good sleep hygiene is? Because I think for a lot of women, particularly perimenopausal, menopausal, right, there's that waking up in the middle of the night, the challenge of falling back to sleep for an hour or two. And, so I'm just kind of curious, like, I know cool room, dark room. I love a weighted blanket, earplugs, but I'm just curious, like, what else connotes sleep hygiene? Good sleep hygiene.
Yeah. That's definitely something that I think a lot of women over 40 start to deal with. They can get to sleep, but then they wake up around 3:00 in the morning when that's when your liver starts processing. And it's also when your mind starts processing all the stressful things in your life and catastrophizing. I think, again, a lot of sleep hygiene is based on individual circumstance. I would highly recommend if you are not sleeping at least 7 to 8 hours a night, or if you are waking up and stressing in the middle of the night, that is absolutely a reason to go see your doctor and see if there's something either from a health standpoint that's in the way there, because a lot of anxiety and depression can impact that. But also experimenting with natural remedies like melatonin or magnesium before bed can be really helpful. Sometimes even just like a tablespoon or two of peanut butter or some sort of a healthy fat before bed can really help, but staying away from things like sugars or dairy products before bed. And just, I think the things that I would say are probably pretty obvious, like don't look at screens before bed, hopefully 2 hours before, but let's be realistic. Most people are looking at screens right up to the point of bed, but try not to take your phone to bed with you. And just start to like try small of the things that I just mentioned, and as well as going to see a doctor if it's a big struggle, trying small little things that, try them one night, see how it goes. If it doesn't make a difference, try something else a different night, but also tracking sleep. I think I have a Fitbit, and I think it's fantastic for looking at the quality of your sleep. And every morning I look at it, and a girlfriend and I text back and forth on what our sleep scores were, because to us, that's the most important and vital thing in our day. And if something's in the way of your sleep, it's a good practice in the morning to think, why did I not get a good night's sleep last night? And see if you can solve for the smaller issues that are in your way. And then, of course, if you're like a mother with a newborn, you're not going to have sleep. And that's just a matter of having patience and care for yourself as much as humanly possible. But definitely after 40, sleep is so paramount. So anything that you can do is going to enhance every other area of your health and well-being in general.
Now, one of the things you mentioned kind of with this is the importance of habits, right? I like to talk about healthy habits, and of course, movement being, a critical piece. And I think now in particular with us, for so many of us, like we're not commuting to work, and granted, mine was an 8-minute walk. So it wasn't a massive commute, but it was still movement. Do you know what I mean? And now, it's like I'm in front of the computer all day for my clients instead. And, of course, I'll walk the dogs, but like one of them like barely gets around the block, that takes like 30 minutes. He's so slow. And so I get like 400 steps for my walk. I'm like, oh, so, it's one of those things where, that is a challenge, I think, for people, particularly right now. So can you speak to maybe like what have you found to be the most important kind of quote unquote healthy habits for us to embody, particularly right now with, life the way it is, which is a little different than usual.
Right. Definitely. It has been an odd year, and I completely resonate with the dog walking situation because I have old dogs myself. I think that, again, coming back to the Fitbit, that's a great tool for monitoring steps. If movement in general is fantastic, but getting 10,000 steps a day is, I think, a great benchmark to get to. It might sound like a lot, but it's really not. And if you're someone who likes to be competitive with yourself, or if you're a data nerd, something like that is really going to push you to be a little bit more intentional with walking, maybe parking further away from a building that you're walking to, or just taking small walks around the block between meetings during the day. So that's a big piece of it. Also, the funny thing about movement and healthy habits is that they all sort of support and balance one another. So the more often that you can move your body throughout the day, the better you're going to support better sleep. And eating better is going to support better sleep. And then in turn, better sleep is going to support those other habits. So really sort of balancing like the notion of, I want to work towards healthier habits and behaviors, but also understanding that you can't change all things at once. In terms of movement, I also recommend, I've always done home workouts and like videos. You find a ton of stuff on YouTube. There's a ton of different workout platforms that are really helpful, and I do a lot of reviews on my website. But I find the idea behind working out at home is that it's just easier. I have built a habit of getting up, rolling out of bed, and doing my workout right away. And then that sets me up for the day. And if I don't do my workout first thing, I know that there's a good chance I'll talk myself out of it later in the day. Because as much as fitness is a part of my life, I don't actually enjoy working out. I enjoy having worked out. So whatever you can do in your mind and with your mindset to say, this is what I can do today, whether that's a walk around the block or a 10-minute workout that you find on YouTube, or a 30-minute yoga class, anything that you can do is better than doing nothing. So always starting from that standpoint. And momentum is a beautiful thing, and it can take you very far in terms of behavior. So always start small, start manageable, start with something that you know you will do, and let it kind of propel you forward.
The Fitbit, the idea about tracking, I think is so important, Caren. And I love that you check in with your friend, Tim, every morning because he has an Apple Watch and he'll be like, I got 100% of my sleep, And I'm like, oh, okay, like I get the report like every morning, And so it's funny how people really do become like obsessed isn't quite the right word, but really engaged with that. And, even for me with like, if I am walking the dogs, I always have my phone. Like I have like a little thing that kind of goes around me so that I can like hold it like a little purse sort of thing. And that way, I get my steps tracked with that. So for listeners who don't have a Fitbit or an Apple Watch or something like that, your phone will do it. And so that's super handy and also helpful. Because, if we don't track things, it can be hard to know, even like you said, okay, I didn't have a good night's sleep. Okay, what did I eat beforehand? What was on my mind? What was different about last night versus previous nights? Or when I eat this, I notice that this happens. It's this idea of tracking to become more aware of what's working and what isn't working. And that, that sounds simple, but I think it's a big shift for many of us because it's like, oh, well, we just do what we've always done,
Right. It's habits, right? So habits are either health enhancing or they're deleterious. So it's that willingness to be conscious and take steps, whether physically, literally, and figuratively, take steps to just make small improvements in different areas. So yeah, I talk about things like Fitbits or Apple phones, but you can get a pedometer off of Amazon for like $10, or you can also map out different walking routes in your neighborhood using Google Maps. Technology doesn't have to be a hindrance. It can definitely help you, but don't look at it as an all or nothing thing. I always like to look at technology as something that I can use as a tool to better myself, whether it's tracking steps or finding a workout on YouTube or finding people. Oh, and this is another one, especially for women over 40. Social media, as we all know, can either be something that makes us feel very bad about ourselves, or it can be something that is a tool for learning and inspiration. I will say I have a love-hate experience with Instagram. It can often trigger a lot of comparison and anxiety, but it can also inspire. I follow a lot of women in the fit over 50, fit over 60, and fit over 70 realm. And you can find these folks through hashtags, using those actual hashtags. And I'm so inspired by women that I see in their 70s that are lifting weights or doing yoga or going for a run, and they look amazing and they feel amazing and they're sharing their fitness journey at that age. And I just think that's so powerful because everything that you're doing to invest in your body, mind, and spirit today, it's going to articulate what the value of your life is 10 years from now. So I'm 50 and I am now training for my 60-year-old self. And I use social media to find those cues of women that are 10 years ahead of me, that are killing it with their health and fitness. And it's not about looks or vanity, although those things are all great too. It's about the energy that they have and the power that they exude and just the self-acceptance that they have. There's just so much goodness there. And I find it so inspiring. So that's another thing that I would highly encourage any woman to look for. Maybe don't follow the 20 and 30-year-olds that are taking, butt selfies in the gym mirror, and find women that are in their 50s and 60s that look fantastic.
Yeah. Are there any that you're just like, oh my gosh, when I follow this person, I'm immediately inspired? I mean, I'll say, because one thing is, for a while, and this might still be the trend, but a lot of women were letting their hair go natural and they had gorgeous gray hair. Right. And so I was following all these women that had just this beautiful gray hair. And now I'm like #adult ballerina. I'm following a lot of that. And I just love seeing it in my feed. So I'm curious, are there any that you're like, oh my gosh, every time this pops into my feed or this hashtag, I'm like so inspired?
Yes, a couple that come to mind. There is a woman, her handle is Yoga Darling, and I can send you these handles so you can put them in the show notes. Her name is Becca, and I think she's 60 now, and she is just adorable and does all the yoga poses. And she's just amazing. She's one of those women that have let her hair go natural. And I just love everything about her character and her vibe. If you're interested in like weight training, there's a woman, her name is Train with Joan, and her daughter. So Joan is in her 70s and her daughter is a fitness trainer. So she kind of took on her mom as her mom entered her 70s, and she has got an amazing physique, but she's also just like, her transformation energetically is fabulous. And you can tell all of these women that take care of themselves physically just look like 10, 20 years younger than they actually are. So Train with Joan is one. And then if you're into bodybuilding, there's a woman, her name is Helen IFBB Pro. I'd have to send the link to you, but she is actually a bodybuilder at the age of 60. I think she's around 64 right now, and she is just incredible too. And she also has a podcast called Age is Irrelevant. That's incredibly inspiring. I just adore her work. So those are three, but if you're not into weightlifting, you might find her vibe a little bit intimidating. So you just have to find women that exude the energy and are following a fitness and health regime that you can relate to. Those women, I relate to all of them, but everybody's unique. But there's so many women out there over 40 who are just taking great care of themselves and taking other people along on that journey with them, which is what I so appreciate about social media.
Absolutely. It is. It's super duper inspiring. And, one of the pieces I feel like that ties into all of this whenever we think about healthy habits and taking good care of ourselves is like our skincare routine, our beauty kind of routine of sorts. And, it can be so simple and yet it's also so important. And there's so many products out there. So I'm just curious for you, is there anything that you have found to be particularly helpful, kind of as you age?
Mm-hmm. I've never been one to spend a ton of money on beauty products. So, but as I've gotten older, I have also been a little bit more aware of things like toxins and things I'm putting on my skin, because your skin is an organ that absorbs everything on it. So I have moved towards more non-toxic beauty products, especially around skincare. I'm sure a lot of your listeners have heard of Beauty Counter. I've tried a few of their products. I do really like them. They're a little on the pricey side. And I found that I get similar results from a brand by the name of Palmer's. And they do body oils and moisturizers, and they're very clean, and they're also super inexpensive and great quality. So there's Palmer's face oil that I really like, and their body oil I really like. And they also have a coconut moisturizer that I really enjoy. And then one other product that I would say, it's a little on the pricey side, but I think is super worth it. Primarily Pure, they do deodorants. And I know of a woman who passed away from breast cancer. It was her own belief, and this is not, I don't know if this was medically confirmed or not, but it was her belief that it was the aluminums in deodorant, because you have so many lymph nodes around your armpits. It was her belief that that was what brought on the breast cancer. I don't know that to be true or not, but it kind of stuck in my mind. Like, we think about it, there are a lot of lymph nodes in your armpits, and you probably don't want to be putting a lot of toxic ingredients in that area or any area of your body. So I moved towards Primarily Pure, and their deodorants last a long time. They are all natural, but they work really super well. And I just love the branding and the packaging, and it's a small women-owned business. So I would highly recommend looking into, they do a lot of face products as well, but I love their deodorants. So those would be my go-tos.
Great. Thank you. And listeners, I'll put a link, to some of these products and also the hashtags that she's recommended and people to follow in the show notes, of course, to make it easy for you. Now let's chat a little bit about nutrition. I know we've touched on it a bit, but, is there anything that you really have found to be kind of the most useful or helpful thing? Because like I said, your post on Instagram, that really stuck with me. And it was just random, that I came across it and I was like, what a great goal. And yet it's oddly hard. So I'm curious how that's been going for you.
Yeah. So the idea of a veggie with every meal is so simple, not easy, but so incredibly valuable. So I'll give you sort of a rundown of how I would incorporate a veggie at every meal, especially now that a lot of us are working from home. It's a little bit easier to cook. So every morning I have a couple of eggs and I always saute with it either kale or zucchini or some chopped up cabbage. Like I just always have something like a vegetable chopped up in my refrigerator. And I always just throw it in the pan before I start my eggs, and I get it sauteed a little bit with a little bit of olive oil or something like that. And I toss in a couple of eggs. I don't necessarily mix them all together, but like any sort of bed of vegetables is a great bottom layer to let's say eggs. And then I tend to have in the summer, I'll have salads with a protein. And then in the winter, I will do a ton of soups. And I got to tell you, soups are such a great prep food because they're a wonderful way to get your veggies in, especially if you have kids. Getting veggies into them can be difficult. So any sort of soup that you can make that, if you don't like the taste of vegetables, you can puree it into a mix, like a creamy blend. Anything that has sweet potato or cauliflower or carrots are great or butternut squash is also a great ingredient for soup. But anything that's kind of going bad in your fridge, I highly recommend you just saute it up, put some soup base in there and use a hand immersion blender, blend it up, keep it in your fridge, use it as a soup that you can either toss a protein in or eat by itself, or you can even just put it in a mug and sip on it throughout the day. I also like to sip on miso. I always have miso in my fridge. So I'll put 2 tablespoons of miso with hot water and sip on that. But soups are fantastic. I have those throughout the week, and I always meal prep on a Sunday or Monday. And then for dinner, I'll have like a protein and veggies. So it'll either be roasted veggies, barbecued veggies, but always veggies first. 50% of my plate I try to cover with veggies, which can be difficult because veggies they don't come in a package. They usually don't. Well, you can get them prepped, but there's something that you've got to put a little bit of effort and attention to, but the payback is enormous. Not only are veggies really tasty, especially if you experiment with them, and a little bit of coconut oil or olive oil on veggies when you cook them can go a long way, just a little bit of salt and pepper too. But the phytonutrients and the fiber and the water, like they are so health giving and they are so delicious. So if you don't have a palate for veggies, open your mind, start experimenting, and you will be surprised of how good they will make you feel.
Yeah, it is amazing. I always feel so good after eating. Like our big thing is cauliflower, like charred cauliflower. Of course, you can have it with tacos or things along those lines, but with buffalo wing sauce, it's so good.
Mm-hmm. I do those in the air fryer and they're delicious.
Oh,
but generally, I say for women over 40, some people are hesitant to reduce carbs, thinking that you should never shut out or turn off a food group. Carbs are also vegetables. So a veggie forward diet is also a low carb diet, where I think we probably, as women over 40, want to stay away from are things that, as I mentioned, metabolizes sugar in the body very quickly. So breads and cakes and cookies and crackers. And I know that makes a lot of people sad, especially if they have a sweet tooth. And if that's your case, if you're somebody who likes to have like a sweet treat, but you're not happy with the results you're currently getting from a physical standpoint, then the path forward is really to take on experimenting baking with yourself, baking your own baked goods. I have a ton of recipes on my site that are sugar-free But also I like to incorporate a little bit of protein powder into some of my baked goods, which you can't, which is optional, of course. But I find that if you add protein to baked goods, it really makes them more satisfying. There's an art to it because they can get dry if you add too much, but a little bit goes a long way. And then also there's some natural sweeteners like stevia as a plant. It is not going to disrupt your metabolic process as much as like an artificial sweetener. Erythritol is another one that is not something that's harming to the gut. So if you can start experimenting with sweeteners like that, natural sweeteners, it can go a long way in terms of moving you away from processed baked goods to something that you're doing yourself and you know exactly what's in it. So that's definitely something I would highly recommend.
Beautiful. So many great tips, Caren. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And also like, baked apples and things like that are super yummy this time of the year. And I'm curious, any final thoughts before I ask you my final question today?
I think that generally I would just come back to, if you're not happy where you are right now, the idea is to take small incremental change, be aware of the things that you're doing that add value to your health and wellness and that take away from your health and wellness. And I know that a lot of us have ingrained habits that we couldn't possibly let go of certain things that we love. And that's fine, but you can change things around it. I'm trying to come up with the words here. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Try to incorporate change where you can that doesn't feel uncomfortable or too uncomfortable. And again, you'll be surprised how far momentum can take you once you start seeing positive change in your diet and in your lifestyle and the results that you're getting physically and emotionally and spiritually.
Yeah, I think that's just such a great reminder. It really is. It's like these small shifts. And one of the things that you said earlier that I just want to emphasize is like asking, okay, is this a health enhancing decision I'm about to consume? Or is this, not? And not that everything has to be, 100% health enhancing all the time, but ideally working a bit more towards that, I think is just a great thing to be asking ourselves.
Sure, absolutely.
So my last question for you, Caren, I'd love to ask everybody this who's on the podcast, with it being called Tranquility du Jour, how are you finding tranquility in your everyday right now?
Oh, my morning routine is everything. So I wake up, I take the dogs out for a quick spin, and then I go back to bed and I journal. I meditate for 10 minutes. And I work out before I start my day. So I pour into myself before I pour into others or pour into my work. And I just find that when I set my day up like that, it really just takes me so much further throughout the day. And I'm a better person for it. So 100% tranquility starts as soon as I wake up.
Beautiful. Such a great reminder, the importance of a morning routine. And I think now, even more so than ever, right? It's so critical.
Most definitely.
Well, thank you so much, Caren. It was a treat to have you on the show.
Oh, it was so nice chatting with you. It's been a treat following you for 16 years.
Crazy.
So keep up the awesome work, Kimberly. You're such an inspiration to so many.
So over in the show notes, you can find a link to Caren's website, Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest accounts. Also, some of the non-toxic brands that she recommended and hashtags that she mentioned. So thank you, as always, for inviting me and my guest into your day. Let's stay connected. We've got a TDJ Insiders Facebook group that I would love to have you be a part of. We do an online book club, and we are reading Dolly Parton's Song Teller, which is this big, beautiful book. And then also weekly love notes if you would like a little dose of tranquility in your inbox each week. There's also a link to browse my books and planner, ways to find Tranquility du Jour on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, a peek into my seasonless, vegan, locally made, eco-friendly fashion line, TDJ. And then finally, if you have a moment to pen a review of this podcast on Apple Podcasts, would be so grateful. Or any of my books on Amazon or Goodreads. Really appreciate it. Always a treat to be with you. And thank you again for inviting me and my guest into your day. Have a wonderful week. Namaste.